Do we have apologies?
Yes, we do, from Councillor Alder and Councillor Fraser Allen.
And Councillor Peck. I apologise today. Could I ask those who were present to confirm the minutes of the last meeting? Sorry, I should do members' interest first, and I always forget that.
You got minutes first, Chairman.
Okay, so we'll do the minutes first. Confirm the minutes of the last meeting. Are you all happy for me to sign them as a true and accurate record? Oh, you're not sure about that, but you're happy for me to sign them. Okay, thank you. Are there any members' interests? Speak now or... No? Marvellous. Shall we welcome our friends?
Chair, can I ask a question about the minute?
Certainly.
But I don't know if it'll come up, so if it's going to come up, then just stop me.
Okay, well, we won't know until you ask it, Kevin.
I know exactly. There was a problem related to the business continuity, where everything was going to be put in place, I think by the end of May. Did that actually take place?
Tony?
That was there was a couple of issues. Obviously, I raised within the last internal audit, the annual audit review around business continuity, the audit we'd undertaken. There was one aspect that was to be done by the end of May, and that was to review and refresh, if needed, the business continuity plan and give that out as a manual and electronic record. And I believe that from management, I understand that
That was done.
That was done. And the other one, if I just want clarity on it, I did ask a question, but it was quite a small question, so it won't be down in the minutes. But if you look at last time, it says an annual IT disaster recovery event also takes place to support corporate response. Obviously, a week later from that, the system went down, and it couldn't come back because it was a bank holiday. So nobody here could bring the system back up. So we had to wait till Tony sent a note out on the 29th of May saying everything's okay now. I suppose what I'm getting at there is it robust, or is the contract that we've got with people, does it exclude bank holidays?
There was a system to cover bank holidays, but to be honest, Chairman, we're slightly straying away from agenda, not to hide the matter,
I know, I just
but to address it. We can give you a separate answer outside.
so you did come back.
Yeah, come back to you. Yeah, take that on board, Tony. You can take that on board in terms of what we did and what was available to us.
Thank you.
I can tell you now, the staff we're actually working on the Saturday, for example, and on Sunday, I think, on the Monday. But we'll get that information to you.
Thank you.
Anything else, Kevin?
No, sorry to drift off, Chair.
That's okay.
Just as it is in the minute.
That's all right. We're happy to drift occasionally.
Thank you.
Shall I welcome our friends from KPMG?
Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you for joining us with your fulsome, if not comprehensive, report on the audit. I'm pleased to see that you've done a very thorough job and inspected all of the financial procedures and processes just to make sure they're right.
Always.
Would you like to take us through your report?
I will do. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time. So my name is Andrew Carlos. I'm the director. I took over from John Gorry when he decided to retire. The lucky man. But I have been pleased, I must admit, working with the team here. The accounts team has been really, really helpful. As you know, the audit, we've had 2 less months to undertake the work this year, so it came forward from having to do our audit by the end of September to having to complete by the end of July. So today, the final day, is the deadline when we have to produce all our external audits opinions for every single local government client across the country. Equally, on the finance team, they had 1 less month to produce the draft accounts. So rather than the end of June, they had to do the end of May. On both of those, we've achieved. So the finance team did fantastically well, producing the draft accounts by the end of May, with a good set of working papers. Looking at Asim, who did all the work, and for us to complete our work 2 months earlier than we would have normally is a compliment to obviously my audit team, but also to the working papers produced by Alder and her team and Richard, etc. So a big thank you to them right from the start for us to be able to be in this position to have an ISA and an opinion ready to be signed by me. It's a compliment to you and your staff. Just taking you through the actual ISA 260R report for the 2017-18 accounts. So just if you turn to page 1 of the report, the summary for yourselves. Again, just as I said, we've received the accounts before the deadline on the 31st of May, and we've completed our work before the end of today, which is great. The financial statements audit, there were 3 main risk areas that we looked at. Property, plant and equipment, because that's such a big number in the accounts, so obviously we were going to look at that. Pension liabilities, again, a huge number, and again, faster close because it was being brought forward so significantly from previous years. On all of those, no issues to report, all went well in terms of our work. We've identified, in terms of the actual work that we've done, Asim can pick up any specific questions that you might have, and again, happy to pick those up. We've got a few final clearance bits that myself and Asim with the accountants just need to go through after today, but notwithstanding that, I expect to be able to sign off an unqualified, clean opinion on your statement of accounts, which is fantastic news. In terms of value for money, just on page 2, we looked at two particular areas: the delivery of the budgets and the investments into 17-18 that you have. And again, in both of those, no issues whatsoever to report, and happy in terms of what you've done. So again, the big blue bold lettering there, I anticipate issuing an unqualified opinion on the value for money arrangements that you have in place here at Daventry. There's no...
We all have black and white copies.
Okay, and apart from it, so in big blue and bold black. Good. Well, obviously money saving is obviously better. There's no need for me to issue any public interest report here at Daventry. There's no powers that I need to exercise as your external auditor, which is always comforting. And again, just at the bottom there, reiterate the thanks to the team for helping us through our audit. Just on page 4, we go through the organisation and the IT control environment that you have in place. And again, we look at that and we compare your environment against our assessments about how robust those environments are. And you can see it's 4s and 3s with generally sound control environment, except for the journal approval process, which we've made a recommendation again, but it is much improved in terms of where we were previously. And then if you turn over again, in terms of the key financial systems, again, we went through the work there, determined that the majority of the key financial systems are adequate. 2 exceptions in terms of PPE evaluation and accounting tax reconciliation and bank reconciliation, and again, we've raised recommendations in those. Financial statements, just on page 7. Again, nothing to bring to your attention as members. Again, we had a complete set of accounts at the end of May. Quality of the working papers was very good, and we're able to work through with the accountants really easily and stuff, and the response to our queries very timely, and whenever we had a question, we had the answer, which is, believe me, not always the case with a number of my audits. So it is really nice to work at a place where that works really smoothly. That's really a compliment again, as I said. On page 8, these are 2 standard audit risk areas that we have to look at every single audit, so this is not specific to Daventry, so don't get over concerned about this. So we have management overrider controls and fraudulent revenue recognition. On both of those, we were able to rebut those as part of our audit process, and there's no issues here at all. And again, re-emphasise that that is not the case with a number of other authorities that do the work. I'm not going to go through in detail pages 9, 10, 11, 12. Again, if there are any questions on the PPE, the pension liabilities work, or the fact that those have to take that. For comfort on the pension liabilities, because it is such a big number, because it is so specialist, we actually did involve KPMG's actuaries as part of that work. So we had our actuaries speaking to your actuaries, so that making sure that the numbers that are in the accounts are actually correct. Because again, the actuaries actually speak a totally different language to auditors, and I thought we were boring, but actually they
It's only way to make it interesting.
So it's quite useful having them.
Shall I just check with colleagues if you've got any questions on pages 8 through 14? No? Andrew Carroll?
Okay. And then just on page 14, again, we go through the judgments that you've made as part of, or Audra obviously and her team have made as part of the accounts. So looking at property, plant and equipment, looking at the business rates, and then over the page in terms of evaluation of pension assets. In all of those, we have a scale of 1 to 5. As long as you're within the 1 to 5, that's an acceptable range for me. It might drift into the 1s and the 5s, obviously on the pension valuations of the assets, but as long as it's not a 0 or a 6, then obviously I am satisfied. It's not an issue here. So that's there for your information, that all of that is within our acceptable range as KPMG. The proposed audit opinion and audit differences are just noted on page 16, and again, if there's any information that you want, any more detail that you want us to go through in terms of those tables, happy to go through that. On page 17, able to say that the annual governance statement and the narrative report are consistent with our knowledge and experience of yourselves as an authority. There's nothing there that we need to bring to your attention. Important for me on page 18 is to declare our independence and objectivity. So there was no pressure put on me or the team. There was no undue influence on us as an auditors in terms of undertaking your work, so you can have the comfort that our work was totally independent and objective. The management representations letter is with order for signing at the end of this meeting, so I just need that before I can sign my opinion. And again, in terms of the other matters, there are no matters that I wish to bring to your attention as members or senior officers. Again, pause there before I turn to value for money, just in case there are any questions, if anyone wants to raise.
Colleagues?
Just a question regarding the Monksmoor School, how it's changed from, well, I suppose the question is, looking at however due to the fact that the school is considered a specialist asset and so forth, is that through the expenditure of the council, who will own that property then? And ultimately, I know it's been changed from to revenue from capital, and I understand why. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, we will still own the property, but the fact that it'll have a very long lease on it, you have to show it in the accounts as to who has the economic benefit of it. So it's the accounting treatment, but we will still be the owners, but effectively, the school have the economic benefit of it.
That's it.
Yeah.
Purely to do with the lease.
Covered off on the bottom of page 49, Jason.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else wish to use first names?
I can't.
Okay, fine.
Is there another question?
On the discount rate on the pensions liability,
Yeah.
authority 2.7, KPMG 2.5. If you went with yours, it would increase the liability by $750,000. Is that what we're saying?
So obviously, that's your choice as to, but that's what we see as the acceptable range.
Right.
But that's within the acceptable range, I'm not,
You're not.
no. We were not going to push that one.
You're not.
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Is there-
Sorry, just to add in there, like, you know, there are like 4 different assumptions in there. From what we think, like on one end you have like the discount rate assessed as 5, but on the other assumption it's on the other side. So in the net impact, we think that it's a balanced approach. So we quantify the amount for the discount rate, but if you start looking into some of the other assumptions, they will balance out that 750, and then in the end the net impact is what we think is a balanced approach.
Does that help?
And next year the pension figure will change anyway.
Yeah. I'm fine with what you've said.
He's the pension specialist.
Yeah.
Okay, so on page 21, the 2 areas of on the value for money, the specific areas we looked at, again, as I mentioned earlier, is the delivery of budgets and the investments that you have in 17-18. Again, in terms of the delivery of the budget, I know, and everyone around this table knows, that it's going to get increasingly difficult. The fact that you are able to put money into the general reserve at this moment in time is useful, but how long you can manage to do that and keep doing that is obviously part of Audra's job in terms of medium-term financial strategy. But it's not going to get any easier, and again, the budget shortfalls that you have by 2023 are eye-watering. Really. Again, it depends on everything else that's happening around Northamptonshire as well, obviously. In terms of the investment properties, we looked at that, we looked at the governance around that, very comfortable in terms of that you have the appropriate procedures in place and the due diligence process prior to any purchase and construction, so comfortable and that you have those arrangements that work adequately. In terms of the appendices, I wasn't going to go through the recommendations in detail. We've talked about the journals. Asset verification exercise, again, you should regularly conduct asset verification condition surveys. Nothing shocking there. And again, informal change of management policies, just over the page. On page 27 at the bottom, just on the priority 2 recommendations. Again, just to help improve the process that you have in place. Appendix 1 is and again, Appendix 1, we just have to follow up with the prior year recommendations. And they're either implemented or superseded, so that's always good. The auditors always like to see that they're actually listened to.
Can we just pause there and check? Simon Tony, we did ask for things like the implementation deadline issues to be reported back to us, that they've been completed. Will we see these on a future agenda to make sure they have been done?
Yeah, no problem.
Okay. So the minute that as an action for the Deputy Chief Executive. You haven't been here, so I've not been able to give you anything to do. Carry on, 100.
Okay. But as I said, on the follow-up, that is good news that they've been implemented and also superseded. Appendix 2 is the audit differences that I mentioned earlier. Again, they've been processed through the account, so not an issue whatsoever. Materiality hasn't changed on Appendix 4, and again on Appendix 4, just on page 32, and going over to page 33, they're all of the main reports and communications that we as KPMG support to do for yourselves. And again, on all of those, you can see there's no modifications to the audit report, no significant difficulties encountered with the audit, no actual suspected fraud, no matters to report, and no matters to report. So again, that's a really nice clean bill of health for yourselves and comfort for you as members. The declaration of independence and objectivity, again on Appendix 6, and again it takes you through that. Whilst we have charged you extra for the mandatory assurance work, we've not charged you extra for anything else. So again, no undue influence. And that's my signature there as KPMG. And then the audit fees on Appendix 7, which again, for an authority the size of yourselves, as I would say that's value for money.
You would?
I would. I'm happy to take questions and challenge.
Colleagues?
So thank you. A couple of questions about pages 26 and 27. Two issues and recommendations. Well, one observation and one
Is that
question.
our pages or their pages?
Their pages 26, 27, our pages 35, 36. Well, back pages 35, 36. Items numbers 4 and 5, I note are to be implemented by the 31st of September. There is no such date. I assume that seems to have eluded the Council and KPMG.
Sorry, what did you say?
31st of September, do
There
they
is no such
exist?
date.
30 days.
You know, I always like to pop something in there to see if members
So
spot
which
it,
members
and
pick it
you
up
definitely
and
win
then-
the prize.
Anyway, moving on to the question. I mean, item number 4, the ICT usage practices policy, is going to require a policy to be reviewed and go through a presentation and approval process by the end of September. Similarly, something will need to be done for item number 2 by the end of December. I don't find those dates particularly unreasonable. The one that I find a bit odd in the context of September for reviewing a policy is number 3, with an implementation date of 31st of December, where this recommendation is essentially about a person who verifies that the reconciliation has been done should evidence it. I mean, is that nothing more than the reviewer signing and dating it? Why does it take so long to do it? Or is there something else to that that I've missed?
No, I I mean, in that context, we review our procedure notes and everything else, and depending on the importance of the recommendation within the sort of timescales that we would normally look at procedure notes, then if I felt the need to put a date sooner there than what was already in the sort of procedure notes timetable, and certainly for these ones, when I went through with the auditors, you know, the evidence, if I take the council tax one for instance, we get a report from the valuation office, those updates are made, and there's a system printed report that shows the date that the work has been done and everything else. So for me, the evidence is there. This is a belt and braces where they want us to sign to say that it's been done and everything else. Now I see no reason to sort of change the process. It's not so urgent that it needs to be done immediately, and it's just within our programme of changing the procedure notes.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I mean, I see that procedure notes are referred to in the management response. The KPMG recommendation isn't about procedure notes. It's saying that the responsible officer for the review should evidence that they've done the review.
Yes, and that's
simply sign a name and put a date. I don't understand why.
Yes, that
they
will
can start
happen
that tomorrow.
immediately. That will happen immediately. It's already being done.
So
What I'm saying
implementation date
is
the end of July then?
that the procedure notes will be updated to make sure that people are told.
It takes time to.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Kevin, you were next.
Yeah, just one thing we was talking about, you might laugh at this, but your fees.
Yep.
No, what I was going to say was, they're obviously, as you said, reasonable.
Allegedly.
Well, which is fine. With that amount of money, does it restrict you in what you actually can do? So in other words, what I'm trying to say to you nicely is, should it be more, or are you absolutely convinced that everything else is all right? If the answer is yes, then I'm fine, as long as you say yes.
No, it is yes. I mean, from our point of view, KPMG, we did have to reshape our audit to make sure that with these new fees that we bid for and we won, and that was our contract tender, so again, you know, we had to cut our cloth to make sure that we could do the audit in that time. Working on a number of efficiencies within KPMG, we were able to use much more analytical work rather than doing sample work. We were able to use much more national working as well. So where, for example, on the pensions, this is where I say that Asim was the specialist, we got our actuaries to work across every single one of our 150 local government audit clients in one go, as opposed to individually doing it. So again, we uploaded information for them to review on a desktop basis, which made it better quality work, but actually more efficient. So we did have to re-engineer our audit completely to make sure that we could deliver these audits in these fees, because this was much less than we'd previously bid for, and the work that we did. The fact that people have worked every single hour for the last 3 months is not lost on me in terms of the audit staff, and they are very, very tired at this point in time. But again, that's KPMG's problem, not your problem. The fee is reflective of the work that we have done, but what I can hand on heart say that we could not do it for any less. So in terms of your new auditors, there's no disrespect to them whatsoever, we could never have done it for that fee.
Which is what I guess I'm trying to get to, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because I've seen in business where they've changed the auditors in big companies, and the new auditors have said, we can't do it to give you the same level.
Yeah.
Yeah? I'm just wondering.
I, as your RI, would not have been happy, and I wouldn't have been able to say the same to you going forward if you'd asked me that question, if we'd won on the new fees.
Right. Okay.
But I'm not your new auditors.
No.
They obviously have their own audit methodology, which will deliver what they need.
Thank you. Thanks, Joe.
Sorry, Chair, can I just ask one thing?
Yeah, sure, Bessie, yeah.
It's number 2 actually in terms of the asset verification conditions survey. I mean, how often should that really be carried out? The reason why I ask is, I don't know when the last time it was done and how it impacts on the medium-term financial strategy, knowing that those assets locally may be subsumed or go to another asset list. We perhaps want to get them in the best condition possible. So how will that be adopted into your asset management plan in terms of making sure, I mean, because you rely on self-reporting tenants, which in itself is problematic. You know, you would hope that they'd come forward and say there's problems with the buildings, or, but do you know purpose of use? You know, what does that mean when you go and survey your assets? What do you actually do?
Right, now, clearly, I'm the 151 officer, and I'm certainly not a valuer or a surveyor or anything like that. So in terms of what and how they do it, I'm afraid I'd have to get the business manager to come back, and I can certainly arrange for that to be answered. If I take the sort of common sense approach of what I'd expect them to be doing, we did have a full condition survey done around, I will confirm the dates, but bear with me, around, I think, about 5 or 6 years ago. And that actually resulted in an £800,000 growth bid going forward on the, actually it was on the capital programme, because it was capital works, and some of those works are still being done now. And that was around the time where we actually reviewed our holdings of, you know, should we sell them, should we stick the money in the bank, what was the return we were getting, should we go into partnership with people and everything else. And that was as a result of that to say that yes, we were going to keep them because the best return, but actually in order to maintain those levels of income, not necessarily increase it, but obviously without investment in those units, the income of which we get sort of in excess of £2 million now, it was important to invest in those units in order to maintain that income. Typically the leases that we give out are around 3 years, apart from some of the ones where we've obviously built them to bespoke ones where we have pre-let agreements that are for longer. But that said, they are brand new units, so you'd expect their maintenance to be low. So obviously they're inspected not only by the tenants, but also when it comes to renewals or if they're empty. So there's lots of work done there. And of course we also have a maintenance programme for our units as well. So it's not just like we're waiting in between all of these. The units are being maintained as well, apart from the big ticket items.
Any other questions before we move to the paper?
Just for clarification, I was saying it's 8 years since they've been assessed.
No, I think I said 5 or 6.
5 years since they've been. So
as in a full assessment. That's not to say that they haven't been assessed along the way as each of the units come up for renewal and things like that, or as tenants do, let us know about issues. So it's not like we're completely blind.
Yeah, I'm not worried about the tenants. I'm worried about if it's 5 years. So there's a date appearing against an asset when it was revalued or something like that?
No, not revalued. This is about a condition survey.
Okay, so there's a date against a condition survey?
Yeah, and also part of the valuations would take the condition of the assets into account. So they'd look at our maintenance programme. So they'll know that if we had no maintenance, then the chances are they're valued, our commercial properties are valued every year. So.
Right, okay, thank you. Thanks, Chair.
You happy? So move on to the paper. And the statement of accounts. Very light reading.
Okay, members, you'll notice that when you came in, I sort of handed out a pack to you. Now, I'm not proposing to go through this pack, but basically, as highlighted by my colleagues here, in the very short space of time that we have during the audit, we really do take until the sort of last minute to make sure all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. And there's a few pages in here where there are some rounding differences, and I really am talking about rounding differences, a difference of 1. So we've made those amendments. And also one of the, where we agreed to make the changes for the Monksmoor School, we forgot to change one of the notes. So it was highlighted and you did the main things, but one of the notes wasn't updated. And also one of the ones where you bring the figures forward from the previous year, the figure was, instead of an 8, we'd put a 0. So quite easy to do. So this is just literally correcting those, so to replace those pages. But like I say, I'm not intending to go through, because it is literally just that, fine-tuning and nothing to report. The top one, of course, is just after all of those changes, I have to say that they are what they are, so I have to give it today's date, the 31st of July, to say that everything in there is as it should be, as at today's date. So then just turning to the report itself, I've captured in here in terms of the responses to the issues raised by KPMG, so I'm not proposing to go through those again, as I think members have questioned them already. And really just to sort of remind members in the statement of responsibilities at 4.5 really, as to what it is we're here to do tonight, and hopefully some of the comfort that you've gained not only from KPMG giving their report, but certainly throughout the year the reports from Scott and the team, because all of these processes are not just in the few months where we do the statement of accounts, but a lot of the work that goes into that leading up to. So all the comfort that you get from the annual governance statement, the internal audit reports, and finally, I have to say, thank you in return to our colleagues here. We've worked for a very long time with KPMG and got a good working relationship. We have many debates where we each put our thoughts forward, but it's always very constructive. And I'm pleased to say, from the feedback, we've made some good improvements that we'll take forward. So I'm hoping the committee have got a good sense of where we are. Certainly as your 151 officer, I'm entirely pleased. And certainly some of the language that is often used by auditors is very limited, but I'm delighted with what Andy has said tonight, and we work very well together. So I'm happy to take questions really from members in terms of what's in front of them.
And we are dealing with everything up to page 160. Okay. So if I could kick off on pack 106, page 106. Bottom on vaulted costs.
Yeah.
Last sentence. Didn't quite understand that. Why did we have charge for not doing something?
When this council had a resolution that they were going to pursue building a canal, you were allowed to capitalise those costs. As it happens, this council has decided they are not going to be building a canal, so there is no asset that will be created, and as such all of those capital costs must be charged to revenue.
So we spent 1.45 million up to the point we said we weren't going to do it. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
And we capitalised that cost?
It was capital.
On the
and
basis
now
that we were going to have
an asset. Yes.
Okay, right, thank you. That answers me. Right, round the table. Any other questions? Richard?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I suppose I should start off by saying I'm a former Section 151 officer. I think it's a very impressive document. Fairness to order and it's a very good audit report. If I had had that in my professional career, I would have been pleased with it. So Well done. I have got some questions. They're not significant questions. They're just clarification of not numbers moving from year to year type of stuff. So we start off on page 108. With a table of expenditure and income analysed by nature. And the lines of depreciation, impairment and amortisation shows a pretty significant shift from one year to the next. Is there any particular reason for that?
Monksmoor Primary School.
Okay.
Thank you, Richard. I
Well
suppose
done, well done,
you'd
your
like
colleague there. Page 111, we've got a table on movement and earmark reserves. One of the reserves is the business re-engineering reserve, and I guess this question is not so much about the statement of accounts, but more where we're going in the future. According to this, as at the end of March last, we had just over £1 million in it, £1.099 million. Given that the council is likely to be wound up in not too distant future, there is an argument, I guess, the fact that we shouldn't be doing a great deal of restructuring and reorganising from now on. But perhaps that's more of an observation than a question.
Sorry, what I would say about that is that members have approved a report of using up to £550,000 of that to implement the Norse changes. So a lot of those costs will be funded from that.
Okay. Moving on, page 127. There's a table on officers' remuneration, which shows a total of £15,668 worth of benefits in kind. I just wondered if you could explain what the benefits in kind were. What sort of things are we talking about?
Police cars.
I think that's it, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
I think the main point is my initial opening comments, which is very good.
And the numbers? Well, I think on that basis, Audra, I will ask members if they're happy for us to sign the letter of representation. And if members are also happy for me to sign the declaration, which is on page 66 of the pack.
Chair, may I ask a question?
Certainly.
Before we sign, but it might come after this. Is it, as we've got quite a glowing report, why are we changing?
Nothing to do with this. It's all about local government and the big picture. And KPMG didn't bid for the 150 that they're currently doing at the level that somebody else bought it for.
You know, we did bid, but we were undercut by 24%.
Good heavens.
Perhaps
So
understand
is-
my question.
And exactly, I'm sitting here, is it a comparative product that you're going to get in the subsequent year, 18, 19?
I think that's the test you'll put to the new auditors, Jeremy, rather than current auditors.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a competitive world, shall we say.
Yeah. But it comes up about every 3 years, isn't it? 3 10? 5 years.
Yeah, we did a possible extension to 2. Yeah.
And I presume it's on a 3-tender bid, is it?
It's a massive
It's a
tender.
national.
It's a national.
We don't. It's not us tendering. It's all local authorities
So it's
together.
all okay, sorry, I'm not from the sector, so.
Yeah, Chairman, if I could just add, there's a national body which goes through and vets the tenders, so it's not something, it's not a choice
It's
from us.
not a localised decision.
We get told what we're getting.
Okay.
So, are members happy for us to sign as indicated in the areas as per recommendation to A, B, C and D? You've done the statement of accounts, you've asked questions, you've gone through the responses from KPMG, thank you. We've looked at the value for money things and we've got the letter of representation in the pack. Are members happy?
Happy.
Yeah, unanimous, thank you. We'll move swiftly on to page 161. Oh, you want me to do it now?
I do, so that our colleague, we have to actually publish this on the website and it must be done today, so I have officers waiting in the wings to go and do it. which is why I'm pressing you to do it now.
I just didn't think you wanted your KPMG colleagues to go.
I can't sign it.
So I'm not allowed to sign my opinion.
Yeah,
Yeah, the only thing we sign my life away from.
Big lovely chat.
Okay, thanks. While they're doing that, shall we move on to the breaches of procedure rules and regulations, page 161. I assume you'll
I'll lead on as chairman. This is the annual report if there are what we term to be significant breaches. It's a joint report, order of myself, and statutory roles. And the significance of the report in this context is, and you could argue whether it's that significant, to be perfectly honest, but I'd rather be open and transparent with you guys. And to that extent, you'll see that one issue is in respect of the purchase card, and the purchase card issue is one similar to last year. Last year we said that it would be appropriate to invoke if need be disciplinary proceeding. And I wanted you to be sure that's what we would do. And that is indeed what we did. Now, you'll look at the breach and you'll see that see a matter of £1.60 over. Right, it's not the point, it's the principle, and we as custodians, as it were, of high standards and the like, would expect compliance, nothing less. And you'll see in the report I talk about striving for perfection. That's what one has to do, and you expect us to do that. But in particular on that one, it was also irritating that it happened, and we wanted to make sure that we send a message. And in order in particular, we'll reissue messages. We are suggesting to staff to remind them of the need to comply and consequences, such as disciplinary action if need be. And we also changed the constitution, if you recall from council, there was a minor change in the constitution to help clarify this. And I would say about disciplinary action in the sense of, or proceedings more accurately, notwithstanding in this case, there was no further action needed apart from reminding them of procedures. To actually go through such a process is not comfortable for a member of staff. So in that, if nothing else, that sends a message. But in due course, if things needed to heighten, then we would heighten. The other topic is in respect of procurements, and this is traditionally where you do get issues. Now, let's be clear, this authority doesn't have many issues of note, and I will want to have, if you wish, Scott's input into this, because he picks up a lot of this work through audits. And I think it's fair to say, in terms of Scott's understanding of what's happened, there's nothing of significance for him to worry about for this committee per se. But Scott can comment on that, I know he said that to me. But where you've got issues here is in respect to several features. One is contract sign-off, where there was some sign-offs which were not done as per process, which is 4.2.2 in particular. And management have indeed been instructed by Marshal Officer and myself to actually engage assessment of implications, issue instructions and reminders of requirements, and to report back to the Corporate Procurement and Efficiencies Working Group. And that working group, you see, also features subsequently in respect of procurement approaches not having gone through that working group. And yes, it's a working group, but it's a working group for a purpose, and it's a working group with expertise around the table to test what people might be doing to try and keep the council's money and its expenditure properly protected, as it were, or properly used. So the role of that working group has been highlighted in several instances as reported, and that's one of the reasons for that significance. It's a repeat. There's a pattern there. We want to work on it, and we will work on it, but it's necessary for you to have a cumulative sense of something going on, or individually not that significant. And in that respect, there was training provided last time, and I put in the phrase that it was of some worth. I'm not going to pretend it was of magnificence.
Sounds a bit like damned and faint praise.
Well, I didn't go, but I'm using a colleague who is here tonight who may well want to expand on that. But I shouldn't be saying it's damning, personally. It's not damning, but there's more to be done, clearly. If it had been perfect, we would have had issues this year. So in that sense, there's a need for continuation of such a programme. I will say, again, I've kind of given you the insight as to what was going on in part. It's not an explanation that's satisfactory to rely on alone, about now having, thankfully, a permanent corporate procurement officer position who knows our authority, has worked here before, and is competent as far as we are concerned. That, I think, or colleagues think, will be a particular improvement. And there's also the toolkit that's been mentioned in the reports. So again, I'm saying we aim for perfection, but let's be realistic. We're not going to get there, but there's no harm in striving for it. This is the right thing to do. Proportionately, these few breaches are exactly that, few. But we'll be reporting to the board and I whatever is required to bring to your attention what we did to be significant. And I think you can see we set the bar quite low in that sense, given what we've had put forward to you tonight. So sorry to cause you to engage your time on it, but we thought it was important enough to bring forward. And finally, to say, I think no losses identified as a result of, we don't believe there are any losses as a result of these instances. Thank you, Chair.
Colleagues, any questions, Rajiv? No, I'm just letting I've seen you.
First one is 422, 424 and 45 all refer to those particular cases being high value. I'm dealing with a procurement card thing at 411. You said it was only £1.60 over, but it was the principal. So here we're talking about over £50,000, but we've got no information as to how far. I mean, it could be 50,000 and 10 pence. It would be over. Well, it could be £500,000. I mean, what sort of scale are we talking about on these? Are they the sort of things we should be jumping up and down and getting excited about?
Well, if Scott can help looking for that, that's one thing. The other thing I would say, I'm not so... Of course, I'm bothered about the value per se. What I'm bothered about is the process not being followed.
Sure, I appreciate that, but I think it's a matter of information for us.
Fine.
I mean,
we can.
It kind of just says what
Do you know Scott?
Yeah.
which is a category without limit.
Yeah. I think to comment on that aspect, you're not talking about necessarily materiality in terms of poundage. Yes, the projects are of high value, but we're talking more around process being not followed correctly, rather than the pound sign in terms of figures.
I get that,
Yeah.
and it would be useful to hold, I think.
Some of them are, the other thing to sort of mention as well is, as part of the annual audit review, and I raised it in there, is that as internal audit we are part of the process. We audit review every high value contract over £50,000 that the authority enters into. We go through it with fine tooth comb in terms of the procurement aspect, project management and the like, and all the governance aspects around it. So you're more likely for us to pick up issues around high value contracts rather than low value, which there will be more of quantitatively throughout the authority. And we're not having all the resources to audit all low value procurements, but we do for high value. And that's really then reflective here of probably the number of breaches that are found, because we do go through them in detail.
Follow up, but do we have the numbers as your question?
Thanks,
Still,
that's a specific question, and I've not been given an answer.
we've got the values.
I haven't got values, but I can tell you what projects they were, and you can...
It was the values I was looking for, particularly. Okay, you haven't got them.
No.
The second question is, really, I mean, I'm a little concerned about who was breaking the rules here. And to use an analogy, a clerical assistant perhaps might persuade themselves it's okay to take 50 quid out of the petty cash tin. It's not, but they might. I could understand the process. They might go through. They can borrow it, and put it back the day after tomorrow, type thing. A chief internal auditor doing that, it should be a hanging offence because they ought to know better. I could understand a series of managers in different departments who've got lots and lots of things to do, might possibly inadvertently break procurement rules. Shouldn't do, but I can even understand they might. But to have most of these cases actually been breaches by the corporate procurement officer is absolutely appalling. Notwithstanding that he's an interim, and I know 427, where by inference you're saying that the person wasn't particularly competent, but I just think that's awful.
It's not satisfactory. I've been careful with my comments deliberately in terms of personal effect, if you like. But we've said it was unsatisfactory, the interim arrangements in general, and we have got something better in place. Can I say to you that we'll never have a breach again? No, as I tried to indicate. So, so that's the reality, but we're just trying to do what we can to mitigate. We've recognised there was a problem at that time in terms of interim. Do we want to do interim again? No. One of the issues we have as an authority, given what's going up in Northamptonshire, the government reorganisation, is the pressure on getting people to fill posts. And we do worry that this post being quite a significant post, as you identify. And really, that person is it. We would have concerns if that person left the authority prematurely, shall we say. However, it's a risk. I just want you to be aware of that it's a risk we recognise.
I'm just flagging up, I think, of all the people in the council who have broken the procurement rules, for it to be the corporate procurement manager is appalling. But anyway, we don't have
no longer with us, Chairman.
Jason.
Well, first of all, as always, this time of year, it's a very candid and transparent report, and your actions are always reassuring. Just going back to 422, I'm just interested in the relevance of the interim appointment. So what I'm trying to say is, was there an proper induction programme where they knew their responsibilities? Was it an internal appointment or an external appointment in terms of promotion versus a lack of sort of understanding and clarity of what they should or shouldn't be doing?
External appointment, called correctly. Because partly I was away for some of this period, remember right, Scott?
Agency.
Agency. Yes, inducted, as it were, to what was required. Again, without going too far, obviously that induction didn't have the desired effect. You understand where I'm coming from now, do you?
There's no learning process here for senior management, bringing in high-level agency.
Well, I think there's two things here, isn't there? One is about delegated authority, and this is about procedures and processes. And the question that came out for me in 422 wasn't necessarily the interim, because it's bad, but there's a manager who I assume is a long-standing manager who signed off the order knowing full well what the procurement rules were, and whether or not that level of training for those people are there, because I would have expected a long-standing manager to go to the interim procurement guy, no, I can't sign this, it needs to go up to the chief executive. And that's what leaps out for me in 422. So is there a systemic issue that's then leading to the failure to follow process, or is the failure to follow process part of having the interim?
Okay, I think it would only be right if Scott commented whether he thinks there's a systemic issue. I would offer my opinion, which is that it isn't, and that manager should have got it right, but didn't, and is otherwise well recognised for wanting to have compliance with rules. I would like to advise you, but Scott is the auditor who can give you that impartial opinion rather than me.
I wouldn't say there's a systemic issue with regards to contractor procurement. In the main, most of the processes are followed. As I mentioned before, the difficulty with receiving this report on the summary of breaches is that the monitoring officer and the chief financial officer are duty bound to report all breaches, whether they are really minor or not. And in my view, yes, it's an irritant that we continually get procurement breaches arise, but in the scheme of the 100% review we do of the audit reviews, then I would expect there to be a number of breaches around procurement. Sometimes the procurement rules and the toolkit and awareness and training, you can do as much as you want for that, but you're dealing with humans at the end of the day, and there will be errors made rather than purposeful errors.
I guess just for clarification, if you've got a £50,000 contract, because that's the figure that's mentioned, I'm assuming in that on the front page there's signatures where people have to sign up to, right? So if it was 10,000, perhaps the chief executive doesn't sign it off, but if it's 50,000, perhaps the chief executive does sign it off, and other people sign it off as well. like the managers, it's just a standard level of authority, isn't it? Is that what happens in this organisation?
No, there's an overlayer of project management across the procurement process, which has elements of approval for the project brief, initiation of that project, and then members will receive business plans if they're over 250,000. So there's an element of approval through that process. We raise most of these breaches through our audit review, which is right up to the point prior to contract award, so prior to a signature being placed on a document. So we will highlight many of those issues before it even gets to the stage of Ian having a document in front of him ready to commit us to that as an authority. So this is about us as an audit review process being able to raise these issues with management. Some of them are procedural. Some of them may, if the chief executive is named to a contract, some of them may put us in a position of dispute by one of the tenderers that were successful, for instance. So it's provide transparency to the whole of that process. And for us, sometimes we are quite black and white with them around that, in terms of our opinion around the risk of that happening. So I don't make any excuses for raising these as breaches to management, but that's where we're coming from.
I understand the risk. That's what you're into. Mine is someone in what you've just said there, through those various stages, must put their name to say they've done something. Otherwise the document won't go forward, will it?
In terms of project management is overlaid, yes, but most of that is around getting to the point of determining that a procurement exercise will take place. In terms of the procurement itself, the authorising officers, the project managers below management, senior management, they will be the ones that will take the project forward. And yes, they'll have, as part of the project management methodology, they will have regular monthly meetings to discuss their projects with their service manager, for instance. So there should be a discussion and evidence of that discussion through that process. So yes, there should be some kind of, whether it's not a physical sign-off, but there'll be some kind of monitoring of where are you at with that project. Are there any issues around completing governance aspects and the like? Does that answer?
Corporate procurement officer sounds important. I mean, is it genuinely a senior post here? What sort of level are we talking about? How's it fit into the hierarchy?
And 10.
Is that the same level as? Sorry, I don't remember what the band was translated to. Is that order sort of level?
No.
I don't know. Maybe actually
We're working on
Yeah,
that.
thanks for that, Richard. Councillor Nicol, right?
I don't know the answer.
We have our bands 1 to 13. So
Right.
13 are our service
But,
managers.
and
And
what
then
sort of
above
level
that
of
you
the
have the
organisation are we
CFO
talking
and
about?
so a band 10 is not a service manager level, but it's fairly
It's
senior.
a principal senior
Yeah.
role below a service manager.
And what we're paying for
Right.
is the expertise.
Yeah.
And to be honest, that's what was disappointing. And I said being careful.
I think Jesse, which is, it brings it back to my point. I know it wasn't your concern as much as that the interim word, but in terms of me, it's escalated in my mind to the word agency. I mean, agency is used in different professional fields, and you can't. It's difficult to establish their acumen within. So, is there a hand-holding or a period where you're supervising them, preceptorship or whatever else, before you allow them to take on? Because this one in the world, you don't know the capability to start with before they take on some of these decisions.
Yeah. If I may, in terms of a procurement officer and their expertise and their skills, that's about the rules and regulations, if you like, of procurement. And then so that's their specialism in terms of, knowing EU rules and everything else that you have to follow. Then, of course, we have our own procedure rules that can change from one authority to another. So you're never going to be able to just employ a procurement officer who comes in and hits the ground and knows everything about everything that we do. And some of these issues that have arisen are not procurement as in their expertise level. It's around the procurement rules of our own individual authority rules. So whilst we've painted this picture, you know, to some extent, if we've got an interim in, that's not necessarily because they're a very bad procurement officer, but we do have a lot of rules and regulations around our procurement. So I'm not saying about the timing, but it's not entirely because you've got bad procurement. There's just lots.
I didn't use that subjectivism as good or bad. I was just making sure that the induction or their understanding of your rules is robust within their lead-in first few weeks before you allow them to make decisions. That's all. I understand there's nuances, differences, but I'm sure they must become accustomed to that before they're making decisions of this. Yeah.
Well, there's induction, of course there is. I would have expected, personally, somebody to be cautious rather than willing to sign, shall we say, if I put it like that. I'd expect a bit more caution, but I would have also expected that person, as they would have been directed, to be signposted to our rules, and to look at those rules and follow those rules. I want to just say, though, as I did say hopefully earlier, that's one part of the issue. Please, we're not trying to pretend to you that that is the sole reason for what's happened. As somebody indicated earlier, well, why did someone else sign off something? Perhaps they ought to have known better. So I think we're just trying to paint to you some of the picture, and that's part of the picture, but it's not the whole picture. And the point about the rules, for example, being quite detailed in our case as a council, I think the last time when you had a representative from business team here, you may have talked about the desire for simpler rules, shall we say. Our desire is not for that. We want compliance with rules because at the end of the day, public money, we think it's appropriate to be quite tight. And we are quite tight. We don't make any particular final point answers for that.
Okay, one final point from me. I think I agree with everything Simon's just said. The interim corporate procurement officer shouldn't have done what the interim corporate procurement officer did, and there should have been a better injection process. But equally, I do think, and reiterate what I said earlier, that there is a management lesson here as well in terms of the supervision of agency staff who are in relatively senior or in posts where they're able to make quite significant decisions, issues around supervision and monitoring. And I don't know if that's been done here. I haven't asked where this kind of alluded to, but I haven't asked exactly where this post fits in the hierarchy because I think I know, but I just think there's something we should pick up.
Chairman, I appreciate that was the final point from members. May I just say, one of the useful things, if you endorse the training refresher, which we're going to do, which I assume you would, but I mustn't assume too much, it's very useful to have the comments you've made to actually utilise in the training session. I'm not inviting you to go on for another half an hour, but seriously, those comments are useful to actually play back. I'm not doing that now.
We'll move to the recommendations. Colleagues. Are you happy that we resolve the two recommendations as proposed? Yeah? Happy. Should we move to page 167, counter fraud arrangement and activity? Tony?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. This is the annual report for committee on our counter fraud arrangements and activity, so it's looking back at last year's in terms of activity. The committee's got responsibility to
I'm being blinded, sorry.
Oh, right, okay. You're putting me under scrutiny. The committee has a role to an overview of the council's anti-fraud, bribery, corruption arrangements. This is part of that part. So section 4.1, we have an anti-fraud, bribery, corruption policy together with a response plan, confidential reporting policy, anti-money laundering policy, as a suite of documents. These were adopted by Council in February 2014. The committee in September 15 endorsed the counter-fraud strategy as part of the approval route to Council in December 15. Over the page, top of page 168, is identified the achievements, significant achievements during 17-18 in terms of the work against the counter-fraud strategy and the work programme attached to that strategy. The work programme is shown in the appendix to the report from page 171
A3
onwards. Pardon?
The A3 bit.
Yes, that's it, the A3 bit, indeed. Just the bullet points there identify some of the highlights in terms of the actions from that over the past 12 months. Session 4.2 looks at the fraud investigation work that's been carried out during 17-18. Actually I can just stop the typo there. So the first sentence after fraud investigation 17-18 during the course of 2017-18, that should be not 16-17, apologies for that. So the Monitoring Officer commissioned one investigation under the anti-fraud response plan, and some brief details are set out there at sub-point 1. And in addition, there were 5 cases where initial inquiries were made following reports to the Monitoring Officer, but the initial inquiries provided that no detailed investigation needed to be carried out. Moving on then to 4.3 on fraud indicators, and we're required to publish specified information under the Local Government Transparency Code 2014, and the details of that are on Appendix 2, which is page 177 onwards. 4.4, under the policy, the Monitoring Officer has the overall responsibility for maintenance and operation policy and response plan, and is obliged to liaise with colleagues at least annually to ensure that they remain compliant and fit for purpose. That happened during 17-18, and it was determined there was no change in the Council's expectations of higher standards and propriety and accountability. This response plan, it was reported, was deployed on a number of occasions and was considered fit for purpose. So therefore no material change or update is required to the plan. Then on to the conclusion. So the anti-fraud, bribery, corruption policy and plan have been applied during 17-18. They've been reviewed during the course of the year. The policy and response plan provide the Council with clear systems and procedures to assist the effective prevention, detection and investigation of fraud, bribery and corruption. And the advice for members is to resolve the proactive approach to counter-fraud is endorsed. I'll take any questions.
Thanks. We still have housing benefits, don't we?
We do.
That doesn't feature in this much. Is that a separate area of activity?
It is. It's dealt with separately. It's not investigated under the corporate anti-fraud, bribery and corruption arrangements.
Do we get a report on that today?
We do, don't we?
Scott saying no over there.
No, we don't. Not on the housing benefit work.
I thought we did.
We've seen a policy document in the past, but not in reports.
It's the biggest single area of fraud against local government. I thought to be inappropriate for us to get it.
There are some details, albeit brief, that are captured in the transparency document on page
So is the
7.
23.7 CAD, is that housing benefit fraud, basically?
Yes.
And what's the 115 CAD?
Well, that's identified via the National Fraud Initiative Scheme, so we get some prompts from the national scheme to do some based on that sort of thing. So that's identified.
And is that revenue fraud, benefits fraud again?
Yes, potentially it's benefits fraud, yeah.
So that 139k is all benefits fraud?
Yes, some of it may be council tax fraud. So
we're spending 100 grand to get back 138k in broad terms.
In broad terms, but there are other benefits in terms of what we're spending on.
Time to your question.
It was indeed. One other tiny little question, just to make sure I'm understanding it correctly. 4.25, we've got an alleged fraudulent award of food safety rating. I assume we're talking about the stars on the doors here.
We are, yes.
Is this an allegation, notice that wasn't actually happened, is this an allegation of bribery then? What's this saying?
It was a...
We'll slip you a tenner if you give us a higher score or something like that.
There was a anonymous complaint submitted which implied something untoward had happened rather than... It was non-specific in terms of the nature or the detail of the allegation. However, we felt it was necessary to record, and it was investigated by the management responsible.
Okay.
Just as a side to that, nationally there has been concern about ratings being displayed in windows of establishments which are not actually the true rating that's been given by the authority. So that's that fraudulent, not a financial fraud per se.
Yeah, well, that's the other possible interpretation of that.
Yeah. But that side of the business will be looked after by colleagues in environmental health rather than as a fraud.
Yeah, I mean, I can, just to give a little bit more detail, it was an environmental health manager who investigated, and the allegation was that a food rating award had been awarded not in proper circumstances. The case was inspected and it was found that the award was warranted.
I think it's probably fair to say, based on my personal recollection, that of all the allegations of fraud and impropriety that a local authority gets, the overwhelming majority of them are wrong. Is that still the case?
Yes, in my experience, yes.
I mean, for a variety of reasons, some good intentions, some malicious, but most of them are wrong.
It's just a quick thing. I think I touched on this last year, but I know it's multiple functions that your whole-time equivalents do. It's not just this. We mentioned that before. But it's just, how do you establish your establishment in terms of whole-time equivalents? Do you use a comparator for a similar size organisation? How many officers and whole-time equivalents? And also, is it similar detection rates of fraud of 0 for other local authorities as it is for ours, or is that an outlier?
Well, in terms of how do we set the establishment, yes, we would benchmark, and it would have been done in years gone by on performance indicators, actually national indicators. So that sets the establishment. We don't do any direct comparison in terms of fraud detection with neighbouring or similar sized authorities, as far as I'm aware. No.
We're talking about 1.75 FTE.
Do we need to? I mean, expenditure is £100,000. And like I said, it's multifaceted what you do, and I understand that. And I'm not actually critiquing that as such. It's just sort of, are we expecting to detect fraud for that amount of outlay, or is this what we expect? 0.
I think, we are detecting fraud, particularly on the housing benefit side, on council tax support. And as we go back to the figures, we're recovering 138,000 against an expenditure. In terms of the way that the stats are collected, you could argue that operationally, not all of the £100,000 is spent on that recovery.
Because it's roughly £100 per case, isn't it? Because you've got 1,113 cases, so it's £100 per case on average.
And the complexity of the cases varies quite significantly. Some are dealt with by a simple letter. Once we've had some data match which suggests a claim is inappropriate.
You see my point? Because if you spent 200,000, you might detect 3 of. Do you see the level of trying? I know it's very difficult, nuanced, different, but how do you know?
I mean, a lot of the work they do, of course, is prevention as well.
Yeah.
So in terms of our processes, in terms of how we detect fraud and things like that. So whilst it's not got a monetary figure against what they've detected as fraud, that prevention is how big.
Just to this fraud, you get allegations at the start that might lead to some other allegations. We've had that in the past, for example. The other thing I think is actually quite a bit more important for us as an authority is to retain public confidence in the authority and its handling of public money and making sure it's detected fraudulent use of it. Because if you're someone who's normally obviously not trying to defraud the authority, you're damn upset if someone is trying to, and you want to see that be made an example of. And that kind of reflects our zero tolerance approach, which this council's always adopted. So, but there is no blank cheque, so there's no point spending £3 million, for example, to get through 3,000 back. But the amounts that are put forward do seem to us to be proportionate to what we're trying to achieve in respect to zero tolerance and public confidence, notwithstanding any financial loss we might want to recover.
I think, if I may, just to add to that, we also work with the Department of Work and Pensions, particularly around benefits and council tax fraud. So there's a sharing of information, sharing of effort, so we're getting an effective use of resource in that respect. And we also occasionally will work with neighbouring authorities, so where an issue, and certainly one of the examples in the paper there was issues, well in fact two of them, issues were brought to us by neighbouring authorities, and we tap into their resource to carry out a more effective investigation.
Legal authority.
Thank you. Just to expand on what Simon was saying, which I agree with, I think there is also a deterrent effect. Clearly there is always going to be benefit fraud, because that's the nature of the world, and the money we spend on detection has an effect and brings in what it brings in. But by taking those people to court and making sure that it's in the press, there will be a fair few people that might have a propensity to defraud who won't. Therefore, if you didn't do it, the figure that you've reclaimed, firstly, would reclaim, but it would be an even bigger loss.
Can I move this to the advice then? Are you happy to resolve that? Yeah. Do you want to do the next bit?
It's actually your thought, Chairman.
Well, I'll bring along we said we'll do it. Moving to page 179 then. I'm required to provide an annual report on behalf of the committee. I drafted something and Tony changed it. Which is fair, isn't it?
I think it's...
but however, it is the report of the committee. So if
you should say it's Tony's report.
No, that's mostly mine, but he did change it.
Just sign it.
Is the committee happy to have this report given to the council on its behalf? If so, are you happy for me to sign it on behalf of the committee? Are there any elements that you wish to have edited, changed or amended in big red pen? Committee happy? Yeah. Super. Thank you. I think that's it then. No urgent business, meeting closed at 7:32. Have you got that?